Brad Siegel, and this is my IB English A IOC. I'm looking at the passage on Being Unchosen, written by Joan Didion from 1968. She writes this essay, or rather a life story, of her being rejected from Stanford to both express her feelings towards the subject and show how being unchosen is not the end of the world for anyone. So she starts by saying, "Dear Joan," goes on to say, "although the writer did not know me at all." So she starts already with the tone. It's kind of pessimistic, kind of mad already at the writer, even though the writer had never met her, never done anything to hurt her other than give her this rejection letter. So she already starts off making the audience know that she's angry or pessimistic about this essay. She goes on to say, "In the back bedroom drawer given over to class prophecies and dried butterfly orchids and newspaper photographs that show 8 bridesmaids and 2 flower girls inspecting a sixpence and a bride's shoe." So first off, she uses repetition of and that's kind of just to keep the reader hooked, and keep reading and like going on and on and on. And then she shows imagery by making the reader relate to her subject. By making the reader feel more comfortable, she can better help them understand her pain. Because many readers back then probably had moms that had the same kind of butterfly orchids and newspaper photographs, the same as that her mom had. Later on line 8, she says, or end of line 7 to line 8, it says, "But I still have an investment in the letter." So she talks about her investment, but it's sort of a bad thing, because usually when you think of investment, you think like money, you think it's good, like you're making a good investment, say on a stock, that'll give you something good in return, but it's really not. She shows how it's sort of a chip on her shoulder, and how she can use this to motivate her in the future and be a better writer in the future for the rest of her life. And then I didn't know what mimeograph meant. It just means duplicated. That's the end of my first subject, or my first section, which was kind of just to set the scene. This next one goes on from the end of mimeographed on line 8, starts with "I got the letter" until line 17, and this one kind of explains what the letter says, mostly word for word. She starts off, though, by saying her 17-year-old cousin, who is unable to eat or sleep as she waits to hear. She broadens her audience to a younger crowd, and she still relates to the older crowd because the older crowd's been through what this cousin is feeling, and she's been through what this cousin is feeling. But so are the actual, like, the cousins of this part of the story. The cousins are feeling it at the same time, so it just goes, instead of her main audience, which is people who have been through this, she's broadening it to people who are going through this right now. And then the rest from the quote in line 11, the committee on admissions, all the way till the end, the director of admissions on line 17, she gives a reader textual evidence of her struggle and her pain, so that they could see what she's saying, and she makes the diction more professional, so the audience know it's of a higher esteem, and it's not as casual as her first 11 lines had been in the past. So I think by doing this, she just lets the reader know that it's just a higher esteem, and that's pretty much it. So then after that ends, she changes her diction back to casual, so we know it's her speaking, and she does keep the audience comfortable, because it kind of was boring to read that last section. So it's kind of keeping the audience interested and more comfortable than they just were. And this subject is from 19 to the end of the essay, and it's just kind of her reaction and what she did after she was rejected or unchosen by Stanford. On line 22, she starts by saying, or she says, the words "unable to take" and "favorable action" were fading in and out of focus. So she kind of she personifies these words so that the reader can feel her struggle. and it creates kind of a pit in the stomach of the reader, like the words were coming in and out, like her mind was spinning. She didn't know what to think. She knew she was disappointed, but she didn't know how to react or what to do. And this kind of sets up what she's gonna do in the next couple lines and the rest of her day in this story. It makes her feel in a state of disbelief or dazed, and it just makes her feel sick, like it's just fading in and out of focus, and she's just like she doesn't know what to think. So then on to number 23. This was kind of just more of a setting and imagery. In the middle, it says a big dark Victorian house. So that continues with her theme of dark or bad or pessimistic, because the word dark is in it. But it just a big dark house. Like we think like a haunted house, and it just makes a reader feel a little bit scared almost, and makes them just feel like things are bad and nothing is going to change for her. Later on on page 25, she talks about Washington Square, and in research I found it's a book from the 1880. It's from 1880. It's very old. It's a very old book, but she probably read it like we've read books from 80 years before, even if they're not that good. It just connects to her older audience who have probably read the book. It's a very short book, but the older audience may have read it more than the younger audience, so it appeals to them. And the people who don't understand her pain yet, but have read this, they realize, because the main point of Washington Square is that the girl in it will never be brilliant, but she learns to be clear-sighted, which kind of means that just because you don't accomplish, in Joe Didion's case, just because you don't accomplish something doesn't mean that you can't do other things. So it kind of lets that audience who didn't really get it up to this point, they kind of have a better understanding, and people who did get it have an even better understanding than they just did. On the next line, it says she cried for a couple of hours. I cried. She uses she uses pathos to relate to the audience or anyone who hasn't achieved a goal, because I know we've all probably, even if it's something as minor as a video game, when you were younger, like people cry. So she just wanted to connect, like something she really strived for and it didn't work out, so she just wanted to express her feelings and make the audience like understand what her pain was and what her feeling is towards being unchosen. Later on line 28, in parentheses, she says all my friends who applied to Stanford had been admitted. She makes it seem more hectic or just more like she was the odd man out, and I think that's more for effect. She probably only had 1, 2, or 3 friends that applied and got into Stanford, but the audience would never know that. It's just an assumption. It's important, though, because she shows that she was embarrassed in front of those, whether it was the few friends or many friends that she seems to be exaggerating. She feels embarrassed, and she uses pathos, and it makes the audience sympathize, and feel bad, like, oh, all her friends got in, and all her friends are going to have fun next year and go on to great things in life, but she's just left in the dust to go, and she eventually went to Berkeley, which is obviously not a bad school, but it's not the esteem of Stanford. So she feels kind of devastated and embarrassed that her friends are kind of better than her at this point. And then she goes on in number 30, or line 31. She says, in an oxygen tent, kind of tells a story about a fictional story about Rickford Snyder, like a dream she had. And it's just a weird story, but it shows her outrageous thoughts during the meltdown. Well, not meltdown, but like her, yeah, I guess meltdown. And it just shows how crazy her thoughts were and how jumbled she was. And it makes the audience like connect to her, like feeling that she, I don't know, I want to say this. It makes the audience feel that like they can step into her shoes and realize how how disappointed and how sad she's feeling. And then obviously at the end, on line 35, it says, "Of course, I did not take the tablets." It's a bit of humor to end it, and it makes the audience have a warm ending rather than the dark diction that was just the last about 33 lines. Um, and as she makes her way towards the end, it reveals that it turned out okay for her, and obviously we know she's a successful writer and went on to great things. So it kind of just, there's light at the end of the tunnel, even though she was unchosen. In conclusion, I think she was able to achieve her goal of expressing her feelings towards being unchosen, and she shows how it's not the end of the world. She can still make it, even though she's sad. She still can go on to bigger and better things, and that's it.